I've worked for the mission to Seafarers for nearly 20 years, and I know probably what you're thinking, I don't look old enough, but it's true. I worked in Mombasa, I worked in Immingham, I've worked in Antwerp, and then I worked a year in the Thames and the Medway, and this last year I've worked in Southampton, in this wonderful port that we're now facing. It's the events of the 3rd and 4th of January this year, 2015, that really stick in my mind. Just out there on the Bramble Bank, a ship sailed from the port of Southampton and it beached itself. It capsized, basically. What happened was the Port Authority called me around about 11:15 that Saturday night. My first thought was when the Port Authority called me to tell me that the Hoegh Osaka had beached itself on Bramble Bank and they needed a chaplain, was of utter dread. I really got quite worried and quite frightened. I thought actually there had been loss of life because they said, we really need a chaplain down here and we need one down here now. What we noticed straight away was none of the seafarers had socks or shoes on. So we got the socks on, we got the shoes on, we got them a hot cup of coffee and we sat them down. They were still wrapped in blankets, but it was January, so we had the heating cracked up quite warm in the centre. One of the first questions the seafarers asked me was, can we have the TV on, please? We want to watch the news. Of course, we live in a media digital age. The rescue of the Hoegh Osaka was all over the news. We switched on the BBC and the seafarers were watching live events of their ship while they were sitting to watch. What struck me straight away while the seafarers were watching the news about the Hoegh Osaka, their ship, was I'm thinking, well, if the seafarers are watching it here, what are their families watching back at home? We live in a digital age where news travels around the world in a blink of an eye. I quickly got my mobile phone out of my pocket, pressed it into one of the seafarers' hands and said, call home now. He called home and after a few minutes he really started to cry. Tears were rolling down his face. I got actually quite worried at this point. I put my hand on his shoulder and said, are you okay? He said, I'm okay, it's fine. My wife had heard that the ship had sunk with all hands. Goodness gracious me, what a shock. But he said, it's all right, it's fine. I've told my wife, we're all safe, we're all well. After a few minutes, he got off the phone and I took the phone off him and I said to the next crew member, call home now. And that night, when all the seafarers came into the mission centre, I got every single one of them to call home. So important is that communication link between the seafarers and their families. All the families were assured that they were all safe, they were all well. Yes, 2 of the seafarers were in the hospital, but we were told they were okay, they're being very well looked after. Yeah, indeed, one's got a broken leg and broken wrist, and one's got concussion, but they're okay, they're all right, they're safe, they're well. About 4 a.m, when all of the seafarers were assembled and gathered, the agent and the insurance agent turned up at the centre, the mission centre. The decision was taken that we need to get a hotel for these guys. They need to go to bed, they need to get rest. They're all fed, they're all watered, they've got warm clothing, but they need to go to bed. They need to get some rest. So we called around some of the local hotels and we found a hotel which was just outside the city with space to take all of the 22 seafarers. Over the next 6 weeks, I visited the crew every single day while in the hotel. I took some of them to garden centres, took some of them to country parks, but mostly I was just able in that time to have individual conversations, from the captain to the able seaman, from the chief engineer to the oiler, just to have that one-on-one alone time, which is so important on such an event like this. It gave every single seafarer a moment just to offload some of their cares, their concerns, their worries, their stress, just to take away from them, just to share an issue, share a problem. And it was nice for me just to be able to reassure them that what they did on that night was the right thing. The actions of individual crew members saved lives of their colleagues, and it was so important to be able to reassure all of the seafarers in that situation. After several weeks of the ship being on the sandbank, she was eventually refloated. She sailed back into the port. She was here for a little while she got offloaded, some repairs were made, and she set sail to the repair yard. After that, she came back. Several weeks later, after she was repaired, she came back on service. Yes, some of the crew members had gone home, but there were still one or two individuals that were still the original crew from that night. What was really amazing was the welcome that I got when I went back on board the ship. It was like meeting a long-lost family member. They hugged, and it was so enjoyable just to be with some of the crew members. The second officer, he used to love playing the guitar. And unfortunately, on that night that the ship rolled over, his guitar, his pride and joy, broke. But while the ship was back in Southampton, back in service, he had a little bit of time, and we went up to the guitar shop and he bought a new guitar. I asked him, why do you want to buy a new guitar here? He said, because Southampton will always be a special place, and I want to buy my guitar here to always remind me about the good times and the interesting times that I spent here. But it's going to be an everlasting reminder of the port of Southampton and the wonderful welcome that we received from the mission while we were here. Morning. Morning. Even though I've worked for the mission for 20 years, one of the biggest things that I've learned in all of my time working for the mission is you've just got to be ready. You've got to be prepared for the unexpected. It's like, I suppose, a sixth sense where you just get something in your mind, something happens out into the sea, and you just act upon it. You don't think about anything else, you act upon it. If something like that happened again, would I change anything? No, I'd act upon it. The seafarers are so important to us as a nation, as an island nation. And the seafarers really do need the mission to seafarers, especially when things go wrong at sea.